Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
So, welcome to this Roundtable edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have with me Mr. Red Pill Junkie.
Hola.
Or Joshua Cutchin.
Good to be back.
And Timothy Renner.
Hello.
And we're going to be discussing the phenomena of sound as it applies to, well, a plethora of topics, actually, because it is kind of interesting. And Josh has not written a book about this.
No, everybody thought I was going to, but no, I got tired of the survey and analysis of senses. Maybe someday.
And this, sound has been one of those things that's always fascinated me and how it affects us, and also how it has been worked into ancient structures and stuff. And it was actually watching a recent episode of Ancient Aliens, which I still occasionally will watch, if it sounds like they have something interesting. And they were talking about acoustics and ancient structures, and I said, oh, I'll watch that. And of course, it's a mix of, I get to see some stuff I haven't seen before, and wow, there's a lot of nonsense mixed in with this, but whatever. But I got done, and I said, we should really do a conversation about sound, both on ancient structures and on the paranormal in general, just how sound affects us, because it has such a strong effect on us. And I don't know that everybody actually realizes how strongly sound can affect you, and how strongly lack of sound can affect you.
That's a good point. That's a very good point.
There is that room that they created that has that nullifies pretty much all sound, and people cannot stay in it for very long.
Yeah, I think the record is like 30 minutes or something. It's
so it's a different experience than sensory deprivation tank. Is it?
It must be. I mean, because you can deal with a sensory deprivation tank for a fairly long period of time.
Yeah. I believe in a sensory deprivation tank, you can hear your own breathing, you can hear sort of ambient sound, but in these rooms, it just absorbs all sound.
Yeah, if you look it up, it's got baffles in it, and it's at the Orfield Laboratories in South Minneapolis, and it's claimed to be 99.9% sound absorbing. Looks like the person who could stay it the longest was 45 minutes.
And it really it sets people off. Like, people can't stand it. And you wouldn't think that. You wouldn't think that not having sound would be that nerve-wracking to us.
Well, let's start with lack of sound, and probably know where I'm going to go, or at least a lot of people do. Bigfoot sightings. So many of them. When people are out there in the woods, it goes quiet first.
Yeah.
That'll be the first thing they notice. It's all the insects. If it's in the summer, insects, birds, whatever nature sounds are there, will go completely quiet.
Well, and the Oz effect in UFO sightings is something too, where, of course, that almost goes a little bit further. Actually, you do hear that in Bigfoot encounters too, where like things actually almost seem to kind of freeze. You'll hear about that too.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably a similar phenomena either way.
Here's the kicker: is it to try to realize whether that is something that is physical, that is actually happening outside of the experiencer, or if it's all just subjective perception.
Yes,
it's apparently muffling.
Well, it could be the sign of an altered state of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that is super common to both the psychedelic experience and UFO encounters is this sort of sound component. I mean, you'll hear this oftentimes, before an abduction, people describe what sound like buzzing bees, like it's just the biggest swarm of bees. And that's something that people also report in their trips as well, as the beginning of the experience has this sort of buzzing sound.
Mm-hmm. My mentor, Greg Taylor, who is the editor of the Daily Grail, also the editor of the Dark Lore anthology that he publishes annually. On the first volume of Dark Lore, he wrote what I still think is one of the best essays on analyzing sound effects across different type of high strangeness cases, not only near-death experiences, UFO experiences, like you said, Josh, also psychedelic experiences. And yeah, I mean, all these things that are reported, not only first-person accounts, but also in tradition. Even he cites the Tibetan Book of the Dead, scrolls that were written by Egyptians in order to try to train the soul of the person who passes to the other side. And there's all these incredible similarities, all these similar sounds that are expected or are reported, like Russian whooshing sounds, buzzing of bees, or ringing of bells, thundering or claps, or even sounds of like something that would be more like flutes, or like I said again, bells. So yeah, I mean, there's ample evidence that all this high strangeness is often accompanied by all these weird sound effects. But the question is, are these merely hallucinations, or is there an external objective component outside of the people reporting them?
I will also say those what you just described, those sounds are also very common for people experiencing Kundalini awakening.
Oh yeah, he also cites that several books, Hindu books, the Hatha Yoga and all that, in which, there's also that. And there's even in the New Testament, during the famous the day of the Pentecost, in which all the disciples of Jesus and even I think Jesus' mother Mary were all gathered in a place. And here Greg cites that book, that part in the New Testament is, and when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, and suddenly there came a sound from a heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them, and they were all filled with the Holy Ghost, and began to speak with other tongues, as the Spirit gave them utterance.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. It's interesting how often you'll find in scripture and whatnot where God speaks to people. I feel like there have to be more instances, at least in the Judeo-Christian tradition, of God speaking to people rather than God showing people things. I mean, there's plenty of examples, but I think that speech is the most common form of divine communication, and I think it's also, I think it's sort of tied into the importance that in the beginning, the word was the word of God, was what sort of created and fashioned reality, which I think has a lot to say about. Yeah, and a lot about sort of the nature of storytelling too.
Well, not only that, but the Aum is the sound of the universe in Eastern tradition. I mean, that's what that is. That is literally the sound of creation.
And if you think about that sort of Yahweh sort of sound, it also has that sort of all sort of resonance to it.
Yeah. So I mean, and if you look at ancient cultures, they definitely had a very close relationship to sound, from things like that to the acoustics of some of these ancient buildings. The Hypergeum, I think it is in Malta, has some amazing acoustics to it that literally will change the sound of someone's voice and hit certain resonances that affect you physically. In the Great Pyramid, one of the things that they've learned, and I know I've had Gary David on talking about Gary David, is that right? I can't remember. Might be Gary David. No, it's not Gary David. I can't remember his last name. Gary. I had Gary on talking about like them doing meditations in the Great Pyramid and the acoustics literally just shifting your consciousness in the King's Chamber, because there's something about it, the way it's constructed, that it amplifies and changes the acoustics in the chamber.
Mhm.
And of course, you have all these myths. You have like the temples in South America, where if you clap at the bottom of it, you hear
Yeah.
the sound of I think it's this bird sacred to Quetzalcoatl at the top.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Quetzal bird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's all. I mean, this is some great work by Paul Devereaux has been done on this sort of thing. And I believe that it was. I might be misspeaking, but I believe it was Graham Hancock who talked about how the interior of the Great Pyramid really does sort of have this sort of ringing resonance, and what's more, a lot of the pillars at Göbekli Tepe have a real strong ring whenever they're struck hard. So obviously, there's some sort of degree of. I mean, you guys are talking me into writing a book right now. Also, it's obviously something quite important about all this.
Also, Andrew Collins has written quite a bit about it as well. It is Gary Evans. I did a show with Gary Evans the end of 2015 on energy, sound, and consciousness, and one of the things we talked about is what sound does in some of these ancient sites.
Mm-hmm.
I believe there's a component with Stonehenge as well.
Yes. Yeah, they actually, one of the things they did is they recreated Stonehenge in a computer as it should have been, like if it was complete now. And, and they then applied sound to it and showed that the acoustics are absolutely not random inside of there. And they are consciousness altering type of acoustics.
I believe I saw that. Yeah.
So, I mean, these people obviously knew sound did something to us, and they knew how to manipulate it in ways that honestly we don't know how to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on sort of a more sort of musicological bent, I think it's really interesting that if you look at a lot of the cultures that have sort of unanimously come up with similar instruments around the globe, this concept of there being a drone, this constant sort of sustained pitch, is super common in a lot of different worldwide cultures. And I wonder if like that also doesn't have something to do with sort of slipping into an altered state of consciousness. I mean, it doesn't even have to be something drastic. It could be something as benign as, what is it, a theta waves, theta state, I think. These sort of brain functions can be triggered by stimuli that are pretty simple. I mean, I think there's a anybody is interested. I've never done this, but apparently the Ganzfeld experiment is where you can put halves of a ping pong ball over your eyes, and by not having that something to focus on, you can actually change the functionality of your brain waves. So I can't help but think that there is really there's got to be some sort of component that everybody was aware of and that we have no clue about now.
And you have, and something I've talked about trying a number of times, is the Bi-Aural beats, which you have two different sounds in each ear, and it kind of creates a third sound in the center of your head, but it also affects your consciousness.
See, now I tried that, and it didn't do anything for me, which made me upset. But
it depends. It totally depends on how deep of a state of meditation you're in. I mean, there's a lot of factors, and some of them don't do a damn thing.
Right. I had someone that I think very highly of tell me that she had actually managed to get some compelling results with using some of the Michael Harner shamanic drumming that you can find on YouTube.
Well, that is one of the way ancient cultures entered altered states, were by ecstatic drumming and such.
Right.
It's that that repetition.
Yeah, and I think that there's, well, it comes back to sort of that idea of the drone too, the idea that somehow your brain function is actually changed by these sort of sounds.
Yeah. And
I think the drone is incredibly important, Joshua. I think you hit on something And the idea that it doesn't have to be extreme, that it's even subtle. When I learned how to play banjo, clawhammer style, there was one guy in the area to learn from, and he was this pretty amazing guy. And I say he really showed me more than taught me, because it's not like there were lessons. I kind of sat at his knee and picked it up a little at a time. But he one time explained in this very matter-of-fact way the difference between old-time music and bluegrass music, and he said old-time music's about the drone, which is the style that I was learning from him, and he said just pay attention to how we do it. The people say it's repetitious, but he said it's about the drone. It's about entering that that sort of state, and this was a very this guy was a farmer,
Yeah.
He wasn't a cult leader,
that you know of.
That's my one regret from Paramania 2017 is that I did not get to take a tuba to the Integratron. Which, if anybody is aware, the Integratron is a structure that, again, was designed to have a real it was designed by was it George Van Tassel, Red? I think it was.
Yep.
Designed by George Van Tassel as part of some of the revelations that he'd had through his space brother contactees, and it was designed to have, apparently it's an amazing acoustic structure.
Yeah, and if you look at just the effect music can have on us, I mean, just basic music. I mean, not everything gels with everyone, obviously, but it can really completely shift your mood, and that's affecting your consciousness right there.
I'm sure we've all seen the things where they take a clip from a movie and then they'll play it once and then they'll take the background music out, and you never notice how much it even added to it.
Oh yeah,
until they pull it out.
Exactly.
It's
I don't believe there is a single religious practice in the world that doesn't use music in some manner in their ceremonies.
Yeah, I was sitting at a I had to bite my tongue in half a couple of weeks ago. I was visiting a church, and the preacher steps up and goes, "Have you ever thought about the fact that the only real religious practice that uses singing is Christianity?" And I'm thinking to myself, that's not true. That's just not true. I think that singing does hold a special place in Christianity, but that's just literally not true.
Yeah, not even close.
Only religious practice.
You could say the same thing about so many religions, though. I mean, and possibly every religion, you can say it holds a special place.
Yeah, exactly.
Including Judaism, which here is the the most obvious root of Christianity.
Well, and if you look at the Peruvian Icaros who sort of guide people through their ayahuasca journeys, oftentimes they'll sing in that capacity, and for them, that's a fundamental part of guiding people through that experience. And they even discuss the sort of these melodies in terms of textures and colors and shapes.
Yep. But don't forget that actually the Icaros, they believe that is something that they receive during the ceremony.
That's right.
That is channeled, that is imparted information from elsewhere.
And as our technology improves, we start learning that, we can actually lift things with sound. I mean, we can't lift big things yet, but when you look at the myths of ancient cultures, a lot of them say, these large blocks were moved into place with sound. You have the tales of, the walls of Jericho coming down from the sound of a trumpet.
Yeah, and then there are those persistent rumors that Coral Castle in Florida was put together by using some sort of sound technology, some sort of levitation.
Some sort of something that he did that changed but I don't know if that was sound oriented. He definitely seemed to change the mass of the block somehow.
Yeah, and in any case, I don't think there's anything to it. I've seen some compelling videos that are out there that show that he most likely was a brilliant guy, but did not use anything sort of esoteric to accomplish that.
No one's fully explained how he's done it.
There have been some really compelling ideas though that he was just a genius, but
more than
but
likely,
yeah, but I don't think it's I don't think it's entirely explained. But at the same time, I think there probably is a mundane explanation behind it somewhere.
I think he was tapping into something with the electromagnetic field. It would be my guess. He figured something out that would allow him to make these blocks a little easier, a little lighter to move.
Right.
And
Right.
that was all it took. And then, because he never let anyone watch him, and there were a few devices that were there that looked like they were electronic devices that no one knew what were, that they were kind of sequestered away as when he died.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
It is a very impressive. I mean, not to get this off on Coral Castle right now, but
it's okay.
it is a very impressive place to visit if anybody's in Florida. That's the way to do it.
Yeah, well, and he placed things very much like ancient cultures did. He place them, without the type of technology we would use today. He just, there's no mortar and stuff holding things in place. He put a door there
Yep.
that, was gigantic and rotated at the touch of a finger.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he did some really impressive stuff, and he was a small guy. It wasn't like he was a giant.
Yeah, he was a little Eastern European immigrant who was like I think under 5'5" or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I suspect he probably was a genius, and he figured out how to do this, and then he just did it and died before he got around to, enlightening people to what he was doing.
Right. Now, sort of coming back to what you were talking about, yeah, there are plenty of sort of stories of supposedly yogis and whatnot from the East, using drumming or singing or different things as sort of an integral part of the levitation process. I do believe I've heard those stories.
Yeah, there's supposedly a video. I have never seen it, but there's supposedly a video of Tibetan monks playing drums and chanting and lifting a large block up to like a high ledge up above.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I've heard of this video too, but I've never actually taken the time to do my Google foo and try to find it.
It's well, it was film. It apparently happened a long time ago, so it was filmed by whoever was there at the time. So it's not like a modern video, which would be openly suspect. It's something that's been floating around for a while. I would assume if you looked for the right terms, you should be able to find it somewhere. I've never seen it though.
Anybody finds it, post it below. Yeah.
Yeah, please. Remember that phony documentary UFO? What it was UFO Cover Up Live, in which there was this guy Falcon, although it wasn't Falcon, it was Richard Doty. This guy was said that the gray aliens were fond of two things: strawberry ice cream and the chanting of Tibetan monks. I always found that to be like, why would they put that kind of data? Or maybe it was just to mock the whole thing up, to make it, completely nonsensical. But yet, maybe there's something about it, at least about the Tibetan chanting. I don't know about the strawberry ice cream.
Right.
Well, it's one of those reasons that I always get upset when, whenever people don't really care about the sort of music that they listen to. It's like this stuff. There's a power to some of this stuff that I think gets overlooked in our sort of secularist society.
Well, there's always power to music in general, but there's definitely certain types of music that can really have a powerful effect on you. And I don't think that includes most pop music. Pop music is there to be earworms and, is basically a product made to be kind of addictive and easy to assimilate into your system.
I think it's just like with food and fast food. The more processed something is, the less helpful it is to your microbiome. So.
Yeah. And but there are, and if Mike Hughes was joining us right now, he would use Sun as a example. The band Sun, who ironically I was talking to someone last night about, they use a series of sounds and harmonics to create this wall of sound that affects you on a very deep level. And my friend was saying when she saw them live, there's no drummer, but you can hear percussion by the time all the sounds are hitting you.
Wow. I believe it.
So I mean, this, that's how powerful sound can be. I've been at concerts where it's, again, with a wall of sound, like certain death metal bands. I remember seeing Napalm Death, and as heavy and as I mean, they're straight out death metal, borderline grind band. Well, they were a grind band, became a death metal band, but just wall of sound, and it was actually making me doze off slightly. Not because it was boring, but because I was tired, and it was almost soothing to have this wall of sound just vibrating you.
I remember a long time ago you mentioned that Fields of the Nephilim track, that it
Yes.
actually gives you a physical sensation whenever you listen to it.
If I meditate to Psychonaut, and he wrote that based on different ideas of playing around with sound. I mean, that was his whole point. He was trying to make it like a very powerful song that actually had an effect on you.
Right.
And to me, it works. Because if I because I can meditate to, I'll meditate to their Elysium album sometime, because it has a lot of sort of psychedelic elements to it. And that's another thing. Psychedelic music can have such an effect on your consciousness. But yeah, Psychonaut is just the way he wrote it and the structure of it. It's very ceremonial, very ritualistic, and it definitely would energize me if I meditate to it. Like if I get done meditating with that, I'll be like, wow, now I have a lot of energy.
Mm.
And now everyone's silent. Another aspect of sound.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, again, the more we talk about it, the more it seems like there's something really important here, connecting the paranormal and sound. And I wonder why that is. Like, I wonder if perhaps it's just easier to manifest things through sound than it is, something more tangible or physical, or what? Any thoughts, anybody?
Well, I don't know if it's easier, but I'm going to beat the Bigfoot drum here again. What we barely ever get photos. If we do get photos, they're blurry, and Patterson Gimlin accepted. But what we do get a lot is sound recordings. Whatever these things are, we'll avoid cameras in the woods like they're searchlights. Like they just know they're there somehow. But you can get sound recordings of them. And not just the screams. There's Ron Moorhead first recorded the weird chatter in the Sierra Nevadas, which cryptolinguists have listened to, and they said this is a language. Like retired Navy cryptolinguists said, whatever it is, they can't tell you what they're saying, but they can tell you that it is a language that he recorded, an unknown language. So they were able to put mics in trees and run wires back and get sound recordings of this, and people have recorded similar chatter since in different locations. But it's almost like they will let you know they're there by sound, but not by any means of recording them visually.
It's interesting. There's a guy who trying to remember who his name was. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned him on the program before, but that sort of reminds me of EVPs. And this gentleman had devised a recording system where he actually had the sound recorder in a vacuum sealed bell jar without any air in it, and it still would pick up EVPs in this setting, which technically, it shouldn't have that ability. So that sort of reminds me of that too. I mean, it's interesting that there's so much, so the lion's share of the evidence, well, not maybe the lion's share, but so much evidence for ghosts and Sasquatch come from recordings, and there aren't a lot of UFO sound recordings. I know that there are a handful, because I've heard Mike Clellan talk about them before, but there really aren't as many like purported UFO sounds as you see in the UFO and Bigfoot arenas.
Well, yeah, you have like the beeping UFOs and the buzzing noise you get from UFOs. I think people have recorded the beeping.
Yeah, I've heard recordings of the beeping because it sounds like, again, this is why Mike was talking about it. It sounds like
an
a
owl,
saw-whet owl,
An
yeah,
owl.
a specific type
Yeah.
of owl.
which
But I don't think anybody's.
which we
Go ahead,
heard when we were shooting Gateways to Magonia, and I've never heard one before.
That's really really interesting.
Mhm.
Are they in? Let's see. Are they in upstate New York?
Yes, yeah, they are.
Okay.
But I've never heard one before. We were in the middle of the woods shooting a scene where Joe walks up the staircase, and all of a sudden we start hearing beep, 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 and we're like, "What the hell is that?" And then it was kind of moving around us, and it's like, okay, I think it's a bird, but it didn't sound like a bird at first. It sounded mechanical at first.
Someone backing up a truck? Yeah.
Well, not exactly that type of beep. You can actually hear it in the movie if you listen. I think someone actually put in the comments where they can hear it.
Now, what's interesting to me is that people have recorded that, but they haven't. I don't think anybody has ever recorded the buzzing sound, which would again suggest that it's something more consciousness based.
Yeah,
I would think.
it's an effect it's having on our consciousness, not so much an external sound.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And that says
when I was in college and I was having abduction type experiences, which we talked about on here way back when. I for a time I had a sound activated recorder I throw under my bed every night, and I was not ready to deal with this in any way at the time, so I stopped doing it. The recordings to me were so disturbing, but what I would get often is weird beeps on that tape, and boy, do I wish I saved them. But like I said, I just in no way was I ready to deal with this at that time in my life. So I just kind of like, oh, this is really disturbing, and just stopped doing it, and I couldn't tell you where the tapes are now. But that's what I distinctly remember was just an odd series of beeps, like amongst some other, my own voice sort of crying out in very disturbing ways.
That is fascinating. I remember one time my flip phone was about to die, and it was making this beeping noise that I'd never heard before in my bedroom one night. It scared the bejesus out of me. I freaked myself out so hard.
I had someone else's cell phone they had left at the radio station, and what I didn't realize is that it was still on, and it just never occurred to me, and I threw it in the bottom of one of my bags to hang on to it for them. And the next day I wake up and I'm hearing music, and I'm like, where's that music coming from? And I'm thinking, am I still half asleep? What's going on? And I'm like, no, I hear music, and then it stopped, and I went, okay, maybe it was just like a hypnagogic thing. And I start dozing back off. I'm like, no, I'm hearing music. Where am I hearing music from? And I'm getting up and I'm walking around the room, and I'm like, where the hell? And then it's like, wait, where's her cell phone? Her cell phone's ringing. Okay.
Nice.
Nothing paranormal about it, but it was a little freaky until I realized I had her phone. Because it wasn't a sound any of my phones would have made.
That's great. That's awesome.
Yeah, well, maybe it's the idea that there is a sound, an unexplained sound. Again, it wasn't paranormal, but it's how it can affect you. When all of a sudden here's this sound that doesn't belong.
Well, look at the knocking. Knocking is a common paranormal feature, whether it be a Bigfoot encounter, a poltergeist, or whatever. Knocking is very common.
It's very true.
And the main component there, of course, is audio. So why? Why is the big question?
Yep.
Well, I've always wondered about, how much energy it takes to create a sound. It seems to me like it would be a lot easier to pull that off than something
physical,
or tangible. But I've always found it interesting, and I'm sure somebody can probably correct me if I'm wrong in this, but it's my understanding that sound waves never completely disappear; they just diminish exponentially.
Huh.
And that seems to me like it could be some sort of an elegant metaphor for sort of perhaps the way that time or time travel might work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even the spirit in general.
Yeah, exactly. It's similar to it sort of brings up the idea. I mean, the stone tapes hypothesis.
Yeah.
That gets charted out in ghost hunting so often.
And EVPs are definitely interesting to me. Now, of course, a lot of EVPs, when you hear them, are just noise. They're just, and they're like, seeing you're coming to get me, and it's like, no, that sounds like you brushed the microphone,
Yeah, I hate that so much. Yeah.
But there are definitely EVPs I've heard that are distinctive, where you can hear someone talking. In fact, the Seattle Demon House case there, when they went in, they were just filming themselves taking equipment out, and they're getting voices describing, saying things like, "I think that's a camera," and things like that. And when they sent it to be analyzed, someone said, "Well, we can't pick out the EVPs with all the talking in it."
Nice. Yeah, no, I mean, there are compelling EVPs out there. They don't get that much. They don't get as much attention as they should, probably, because they're sort of getting lost in this jumble of people wanting results so badly that they're willing to, compromise how how obvious it is or something. But yeah, there are some ones out there that are just absolutely crystal clear, and they're hard to argue with.
And you have this other element of the people with the, and I think people have a general sort of suspicion, if not disdain, for these, I don't know if I'm using the right term, the sort of ghost boxes that just throw out white noise. And I think they randomly just go across the radio spectrum.
Yeah, it's like auditory pareidolia, basically.
Right. But we get into this realm with that, though, where I kind of think about the ideas of that we talk about, where people will talk about hauntings and they'll identify specific people, which will later be proved that these people never existed. There was no such person, and yet people will see them and continue to see them. Or I think David Weatherly was talking about the haunted doll that someone, people claim to have all these experiences with. Someone later on said, "Oh, I made it up," the original person, but then people continued to have these experiences with. So are people projecting something, into these EVPs in the same way that they're making things haunted, for lack of a better term?
It's entirely possible that some people have the ability to project these sounds onto a recording device.
Right. There's a great episode of Rune Soup that came out, I think, 2 weeks ago, with the Newkirks talking about their haunted collection, haunted museum collection that they travel with. And it's interesting because there is this one. It made the social media rounds maybe a year or so ago. But there was one, basically an African doll that was found underneath a house, and I think it was Cincinnati or something, that had been wrapped up and bound in burlap that really sort of seems to have a personality of its own. And every time they ask it, it's apparently very responsive in terms of creating EVPs. And every time they try to ask it its name, it will either not answer, or it will give them names like Kevin or Bob or something. And it's again, I'm thinking about this out loud because it's tied into that idea of sound having a special power over the paranormal. In this case, names. I mean, you'll see that idea that if you can name a demon, you have control over it in every culture. One of the first, the Jewish variation on the Mesopotamian child theft spirit that became Lilith was originally said to have encountered the prophet Elijah, and they basically had an interaction where it was revealed that anytime her name was heard, she would actually flee in the other direction, which is why you had a lot of pregnant women being gifted amulets with Lilith's name on it. So there seems to be some sort of real fundamental constant between things like that and, again, African traditions where you literally, like, have the power to control something or a spirit if you know its direct name.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna throw you a fey bone here, Joshua. What about talking about some cultures said you weren't even supposed to talk about them, right? Even just bringing them up.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't say, that's why you had all these euphemisms in terms of, the good people, the gentry, the fair folk. It's sort of the idea that speak of the devil and he shall appear. And
Well,
similarly,
right.
because there's all this conflation with demons at the same time, like you do find some references to being able to control a fairy if you know its name. I mean, that's what Rumpelstiltskin is about.
Mhm.
And there are other variants on that particular story as well. But yeah, again, we see the importance that sound has in terms of like maybe even being sort of a control mechanism, which is interesting, I think.
Also, you're not supposed to, especially in certain religions, you're not supposed to ever speak the name of God.
Right.
So, I mean, it's just that's a no-no,
It reminds me of that. I think it's that bit in Life of Brian where
Yes.
all I said was that it was good for Jehovah.
Any last words? Well, fine. Jehovah, Jehovah, Jehovah. Yeah, but I mean that is where that comes from. I mean, because you're not supposed to speak the actual name of God.
Yeah.
So it's not just to keep the bad things away, although there are definitely indications that Jehovah wasn't particularly a nice guy.
Yeah, man, maybe Jehovah was a demon.
There's also the whole, speaking names of power and the way that when you're working with magic, certain sounds and certain names can reverberate different things, and whether that actually works or not. I'm sure Aaron, if he was here right now, Aaron would be talking about his experiences uttering certain names and stuff.
Aaron is literally yelling at his headphones right now.
Right, exactly. But yeah, I mean that's such a common thing across culture, across everything, that names and certain words have power.
Well, you can take it back to the most basic sort of folk magic in these simple spell books that have come down culturally in Pennsylvania Dutch. We have the long lost friend,
Right.
but they are little charms, and you are supposed to say this way to do this thing. So it's they're very simple, little sayings that you do, often accompanied with certain actions you're supposed to make. You make the sign of the cross 3 times and say this and write this on a plate and it'll cure this or whatever the charm is. But they're very simple, but there's usually a spoken part to the equation.
And I believe in Jewish mysticism too, when you created a golem, there was a word of power that would animate that golem.
Yeah, I think if memory serves, you like wrote it on a piece of paper and you like actually baked it into the golem or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, you had to put it in on its head or something.
Yeah, and if you wanted to get rid of it, you had to somehow erase it.
Yes.
So the golem will, dissolve into a pile of mud. Because I don't know. I mean, sound. What is sound if not? It's the displacement of air molecules, produced by the vibration of a certain medium. In the case of our voice, is our vocal cords, right? So I guess what you guys are saying is that when you have certain information, like for example the name of an entity, and you utter it, out loud, what are you doing? You are adding energy to the information in order to like manifest it into our reality, right? It's like
Yeah.
infusing it with the energy from your I don't know, life. Well, they say no, what it's the breath of life, So when you what do you do with it? Well, you utter words, into being. So maybe that's something behind that.
Well, I mean, it comes back to what we were talking about in the beginning about, God saying, "Let there be light," and God literally using his voice to thematically, that theme of using his voice to create reality.
The Big Bang.
Mm-hmm.
Bang.
There is something very much like that in, I believe it's Hinduism, where they talk about Brahma uttering a sound. And if I'm remembering this right, he utters a sound. I think that sound again is supposed to be Aum, but he utters this sound, and that's what sets in motion the universe.
Through complete coincidence, I'm actually wearing a T-shirt for the band right now.
Nice. Yeah, coincidence, whatever.
There are no coincidences. And yeah, I know with that we get into New Agey territory. We started to talk about quote unquote vibration, but it's difficult not to start to take some of that seriously.
Well, I mean, when we consider it, everything is vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything that exists is vibrating. So it would make sense that things are affected very strongly by sound. And like I said, we're creating technology now that we can use to like levitate things with sound. I mean, they're small things, but I suspect as we get a better grasp on how this technology works, we may one day be able to lift very large things just by applying sound to them. And at that point, we may have come across what the ancients already knew, but done it from a different direction.
Yeah, I like the idea of there being, as we talk about, advanced ancient civilizations, and we go to like our understanding of technology, but I like the idea that there might be something that's right under our noses that we just have no idea how to implement.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Some aspect of reality that they understood that we don't.
Exactly.
And it seems very obvious that most of these ancient sites have some kind of sound tech in them. I mean, we couldn't make the effects like in the Pyramid of Mexico. We couldn't make that effect today. That if you clap at the bottom, you get the sound of the bird sacred at the top. We don't know how they did it. There are ball courts where you can whisper on one end and hear it on the other end, but not in between.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some buildings we've built that do that unintentionally, but we didn't understand what we were doing when we built them. There are some places where you can whisper on one end and hear it on the other, but nothing in between gets it. It's just one of those weird acoustical things.
Huh.
The difference is they did it intentionally, whereas we do it accidentally and go, "Huh, well, that's pretty interesting."
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So what did they understand about this tech that we didn't? And that we don't. And all this time we've never come across it. We've never kind of figured this out. And whatever way they're using, if the ancients used sound to levitate stuff, they were using sound to levitate stuff that were probably made by instruments and things like that, not technology like we have today.
Right.
So,
right.
Because they didn't have the type of technology we have today. That's one of those things when people look at ancient cultures and say, well, where are the Coke bottles? Well, not everyone's going to develop the same way. I mean, that's basically saying there's only one way society can develop, and it's going to apparently be a capitalist one with a lot of garbage.
Yeah.
You know what's stuck with me is I always forget the name of it. Is it diorite? The incredibly hard
Granite,
rock
yeah.
that you'll find a lot of Egyptian sculptures made out of without any tool marks, almost like it was poured, like concrete would be poured, and it's interesting to consider that perhaps it's all just sort of a matter of what your society becomes fluent in. I think that technologies are like languages, and we just so happen to be in a in a culture that is metal fluent. But what if there were other cultures like the ancient Egyptians who were stone fluent?
Mm.
Right, right. Stone and vibration fluent. And if that civilization got wiped out, one of the only things that would come down to us is maybe some of these techniques. We wouldn't have any kind of physical technology necessarily.
Right.
So
No, because maybe they would just rely on things like oral tradition if their technology was more based on sound.
yeah.
Yeah.
But even if they had certain things that were more technological in nature and essentially went through that end of the Ice Age world ending period, then that stuff may not have survived, is what I'm saying. But the oral traditions will. The techniques for using some of this stuff would.
And I think it's easy to forget just how incredibly important oral tradition was before the printing press.
Yeah. Well,
Before people wrote things down, it was. I mean, this is how information was passed on.
yeah, it was everything. And
It was. I mean, extremely important. Every aspect of life would have been oral tradition,
Mhm.
from history down to how to do anything.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And that doesn't really exist anymore today because we have all these means of recording stuff, and there's arguments whether or not that actually handicaps us to a degree.
It's changed the way we think and remember things. Absolutely.
Yeah, because these people learned it. They had it. They had the information down, whereas we don't learn it because, and especially in today's age with the internet, we could just look it up. We don't need to learn it.
Yeah, and our brains are literally being rewritten, being rewired by having this technology as a crutch.
Yeah.
I mean, studies are showing that we're beginning to see upcoming generations lack certain cognitive capacities, certain abilities to retain information.
Yeah, because they don't need it.
You don't have to remember anything if everything's on the internet.
Yeah. And the internet is always right. So, we're fine with that. And
I mean, that's people can quick divergence here, but people always complain about or wring their hands about something Orwellian being from the government or something, but like it's literally our source of knowledge can be rewritten by anybody. Like we got Wikipedia that is open sourced, and yeah, people are pretty good about policing it, but like it's terrifying to me that that the primary source, just in terms of the internet that people go to, is completely mutable. I mean, it's the same idea that like they're moving over to electronic textbooks in a lot of college courses. That's great for saving money for the kids, but at the same time, if you have an electronic textbook, it's so easy to change things, at the drop of a hat.
well, it's not like textbooks are all particularly accurate to begin with.
Well, that's true. I mean, that's a whole other kettle of worms.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry for my that's where the road went, folks.
That's fine. I mean, it's kind of funny because the textbook thing is such a rip off to begin with because they charge so much for those textbooks. So I don't necessarily think the electronic thing is such a bad idea, but yeah, like with anything, when things can be that easily altered, people can hack it, or people can just use it as propaganda when they want to. But they're already doing that to a degree. They're just doing it long form.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also true. It's just become easier to do things, I guess. I mean, I guess if you really want to get down to it, that's who was it? I can't remember. David Michael Greer, I think, said that that the only thing that the internet has really done is sped up things. Like fundamentally, that's the only thing that's changed, is just change the speed with which things are done.
And I would agree with that. Instead of taking, years for something to get out there and move around, it only takes days.
Right.
And everything changes so quickly. You literally can't keep up with it. And the way technology changes, you can't keep up with either.
Yeah, I mean, it's things are disseminated so quickly. It reminds me of an old Mark Twain quote that was a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth gets its boots on, I think is
Yeah.
is that quote. And it's
Totally true. Because people are more interested in bad things. For some reason, we as people seem to be drawn more to, drama than we are to truth. And that's not everyone, but there's enough people out there that we have a whole, a whole market for reality TV shows with people just creating drama and arguing.
which I've never understood. Like, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that the Marvel films do so well is because we kind of like to watch people get along. And generally speaking, those characters tend to get along with each other. I always enjoy watching people get along, with it that way.
Sure. But there is a decisive part of the population who, whether they realize it or not, are just drawn to drama. Like negative types of drama. They want to gossip about people, and they always have. It's not a new thing with the internet. It's just that now it's so much easier to do and so much more widespread.
Yeah, I think part of it comes down to some sort of cathartic Schadenfreude where people are like, at least this isn't my life.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's part of it. So let's see. There's also certain frequencies that strongly affect us, and I think 100 hertz is one of them, if I'm
I
remembering.
think it's
right.
113, something like that.
Yeah, there might be a few that actually does it.
Yeah, it's become something of a myth because this is something that, as you guys said, Paul Devereaux started to research it, and I think it was some type of frequency like that, and apparently, and that's so goes the cliche, only caused by the sound of the male voice. That's what would allegedly trigger the effect in consciousness. Whereas if you would try to do the same with female voice, they wouldn't get the same result. So that's the alleged mythos behind that.
As a musician, Joshua, have you read anything on the whole A440 controversy? How people are suggesting we should be tuning lower.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a I kind of have always thought of the whole thing as really being sort of silly. I mean, for example, American orchestras tune to 440, but you'll find that European orchestras generally tune higher, but not like substantially higher. I mean, 444, you'd be out of tune, but it's nothing that would, I think that there's any sort of inherent benefit to it. I think it's just, a traditional sort of stance. I remember that there was something really popular going around the New Age circles a while back about like 432 hertz, or like 528 hertz, and I honestly don't know. I mean, it's sort of like these people who like insist that there's something like the brown note, which I don't. I mean, like infrasound is a thing, but like the idea that there's a sound that will make you lose your bowel movement is, from what I understand, and somebody's probably yelling at the speakers right now. But like it's not really that practical.
Well, South Park had fun with it,
right?
My thought when I read this stuff about for shorthand for everybody, they're saying A440 is too high. That there's some conspiracy that in Western culture that we've been convinced to tune our instruments too high, and that if we would simply tune down to this other frequency, every life would be better, and whatever.
Yeah.
Whoa.
whatever the case is. My thought with that is it seems pretty. A440 is kind of, we just chose to as like, okay, we're going to use that and we're going to tune everything to that. Then it's a fairly random thing. I don't think there was any specific reason that we chose, A. And if you're dropping frequencies, the other notes come in at different frequencies anyway.
Yeah, well, it's to say that it's. I mean, it's kind of silly to say that it would have. You're right. It is arbitrary. But like the whole 440 thing. I mean, that's a concert A pitch. And like the reasons for like why that was decided go into the best way to tune open strings on instruments, and the reason that and like the way that was sort of derived as well was from if you really wanted to go down the musical rabbit hole, just versus equal temperament.
And also, when we changed from gut strings to steel strings for a lot of instruments.
Yeah, I mean the idea that there's some sort of like conspiracy behind all this. It's if you look back at like musical history, it's just a natural progression of things that led to this spot. And there's also this weird underlying implication in a statement like that the Western classical music system is somehow fundamental or somehow superior. It's the same reason that people say like, well, you're just born with perfect pitch. It's not, it's inherited. Well, that implies that there's some sort of like disembodied golden mean in terms of like the ability to identify pitches is inherited, but the idea that like you wake up one day and you're like you can like just name a pitch is silly, because there are multiple tuning systems all around the world that use as opposed to half steps like ours, they use quarter steps and they use micro tuning and stuff. And the idea that like somehow there's some sort of wonderful pitch that we should all be tuning our instruments to that hasn't been stumbled on just doesn't make any sense to me. It just sounds like the silliest thing in the world.
And
did that make any sense?
It did. No. It did. And if we're playing music, we're not just playing one note. So as you're playing, with no matter what you turn, you can tune to A440 or you can tune it lower or higher.
Right.
You're playing other notes. So the idea that there's one frequency. I don't know if I'm speaking clearly, but these other notes are going to come in at higher frequencies or lower, depending,
right,
yeah,
where you're playing, no matter where you start tuning, So it would just seem a strange thing to me, this idea that there's this magical, lower frequency that if only everyone would just tune to this, then.
Well, it strikes me as one of those situations where whoever made it up had just enough knowledge to be dangerous. They didn't quite have a good grasp on things, so they, because it just doesn't.
It doesn't work like that.
There are too many. That's not the way the Force works. There are too many considerations that you'd really have to take into account, and like you said, it's just not the way it works. Now, I will say that like there is a culture that has sort of built up around this particular style of tuning, where, obviously, European cathedrals were. I'm sure that there was plenty of trial and error to make the architecture resonate with a Western tonal system. So, like, yes, in that sense, it has become ingrained. But as far as like there being some sort of intonation Illuminati, that's just it doesn't make sense.
Now, on the other hand, though, there are sort of the satanic tone, the tones, the minor notes, the tritone type of stuff that is supposed to make, supposed to be more evil and demonic and summon Satan and all this other stuff. And it does seem to have a different effect on you when you hear it.
I mean, yeah. Part of the reason that the tritone got this sort of was named Diabolus in Musica is because it was kind of difficult to utilize that from a voice leading compositional perspective in early church, philosophy. I do think that there is something to be said for certain intervals having a certain like ingrained human properties. A good example. Some research has suggested that every human being is sort of born with an affinity for the minor third. You think about Brahms' lullaby, ba ba. If you think about that's part of the reason that it's in Brahms' lullaby is because of this sort of like childlike association. It's the same interval that you have with na 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 boo boo. A lot of these intervals, I do think that there's something sort of ingrained into humans to sort of be attracted to them. I mean, it's the same thing. There was a great video with Bobby McFerrin sort of doing a brain hack on an audience with the pentatonic scale that I think everybody should look up when you get a chance. So
I've seen that. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. It's so cool. So I do think that there's like something objective about the way that certain relationships between notes affect us. But as far as starting out on, it's all about relationships, right? That's the reason we have 12 major keys. Is it's all about relationships, and just wherever you start, in tune or out of tune, the relationship is what's more important than the actual absolute pitch, in my opinion.
Okay. And you had mentioned something else sound related that we haven't talked about yet, and that's infrasound. The fact that there are sounds we can't hear that can actually affect us. Infrasound is one of the popular explanations for what happened at the Dyatlov Pass. That there was that they got overwhelmed by these infrasound waves that drove them insane and started them hallucinating. I don't think that's what happened, but obviously, since we don't know what happened, I mean, it remains a possibility. But yeah, again, this is a way in which sound, even when you can't hear it, the vibration of it can affect you very deeply.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that more research needs to be done into infrasound in general, because I think that it could be very important. And I think that there could be some real answers in the further study of that if we could actually just get people to pay a little bit more attention to it.
I think they say that tigers are able to emit such a low growl that it literally paralyzes their victims. It's not because the victims are frightened because they're hearing a tiger, but because the actual infrasound emitted by the feline is somehow affecting their nervous system.
Yeah, and that's in. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Oh, is it tigers, elephants? I guess male bull elephants can communicate across incredible distances using infrasound.
Yeah, and it's infrasound has become something of the magic bullet in the UFO community.
Really?
Bigfoot
well, yeah,
too.
I mean, like, well, it's trotted out as an answer for like everything. I feel like, oh, well, Bigfoot disappeared. Well, Bigfoot was emitting infrasound, and it made the people sort of, lose track of where it was, or people feel terrified when they see Bigfoot. It's because there is, because there's infrasound involved. And it's just one of those things where it's like, it's a good theory, but it's kind of it's one of those great things of explaining one unknown with another, which we're all guilty of. But I see it in the Bigfoot community so much.
Well, but
and it's bandied about as if it's fact, and pure science.
And again, it's a great theory. I think it's got legs to it, but it's become this like panacea for explaining things.
Yep.
The thing is, though, if Bigfoot is an animal, then maybe like a lion or whatever, it can generate, some tone either to protect itself or to cause you fear. I mean, it's not that outlandish of an idea.
No, it's not. It's just not proven.
Right. And there is a big difference there.
Well, and I think that there's just as compelling a body of evidence for smells having this effect on people, as opposed to needing to bring out this infrasound concept.
True.
And again, I'm not opposed to the idea, to the theory that Bigfoot used ultrasound. It's one of those things that like it's used to write off so much high strangeness that it's kind of like, come on, really.
And like I said, it's one of the bigger theories for what happened at the Dyatlov Pass. And it's also been blamed, you get not so much infrasound, but like the subliminal stuff. Obviously blamed in, the famous case against Judas Priest back in the 80s, saying they put subliminal backwards masking messages and stuff on their music. But subliminal stuff really does exist. And again, that's a way that sound can affect us without us knowing that sound is affecting us.
How many phonograph needles? I ruined so many phonograph needles playing records backwards.
Nice.
I forget what band it is, but they had a backwards message at the end of their record, and some thrash band in the 80s. And if you played it backwards, it said, "Don't do this; it'll screw it up," or "Don't play your records backwards; it'll screw them up."
That's priceless. I mean, I think that's definitely a thing.
I mean, you can't hear it, but it's still having an effect on you. And of course, it's used in advertising and things like that. There's also the ad that was done recently with the billboard that, you could only hear it if you were standing in a specific position from the billboard. The sound is very targeted and direct.
Yeah, I heard about, maybe Miguel can help me out with this because I'm a little bit rusty on it, but I seem to recall there being some experimental advertising being used in like subways, so that when people like rested their heads against the windows, the vibrations actually went through their like their jawbone or their skull.
Really?
So yeah, their cochlear bone or something like that.
Yeah, something along those lines. Where people were able to hear the ads in their head, even though they weren't audible if you took your head off the window or whatever.
Oh, that's borderline evil, right?
Oh yeah, it's
Well, advertising is evil fundamentally. So.
That's
well, advertising is 90% mind control at this point. I mean, they have this stuff down so well, and they have so many techniques that it's not, because for someone like me, I would like to know if there's a product out there that I might want, that might make my life easier, or I might like, but I don't want to be bombarded by this stuff. So I try to avoid it at all costs, and it's so insidiously like everywhere.
It reminds me, there's an interesting something I learned in journalism school is there's this interesting phenomena called, I believe it's called the third person effect, which is the idea that everyone thinks rather that advertising affects other people more than it does yourself, but it actually affects you just as much as anyone else. You don't realize it.
Sure. What can help you defeat that is understanding what they're doing.
Right.
Like knowing how supermarkets arrange things to kind of guide you from one area to another.
Yeah, and here's the thing, I don't necessarily buy into that, because there are plenty of products that I see that I can't tell you anything about them, at all after just seeing the ad.
Oh, sure.
And then there are the other ones that, you wake up at 3 a.m. with the jingle in your head.
And of course, the internet's just loaded. You try to pull up a news article sometimes, and you're so inundated with ads. You're like, all right, where's the article even at this point?
Yeah, exactly.
4 different pop-ups come up, and it's like, continue to article. Yes, that's why I was here.
No, I just want to read the ads now. You got me.
Or the great ones that pop up as soon as you enter a site, like you go to pay your bill or something. It's like, would you like to take a survey? And it's like, no, I wanted to pay my bill. Could I do that, please?
Yeah, the worst ones are the ones that are like literally like literally site breaking. Like you can't use the functionality of the website is crippled by this giant.
Mm.
Yeah, or it'll come up on your phone and you can't find a way to close it. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
The to X out of it, it's so tiny that you'd have to have the finger of a doll to actually.
There's a Voivod record called Dimension Hatros, and it's a concept album about them going to another dimension, which is pretty much a corporate controlled reality. And they talk about, everyone having the same dreams because they've learned to market directly into people's dreams.
Oh, geez, that's horrifying.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are people out there right now trying to figure out how to do that.
Oh, sure.
I mean, dreams are one of those things that, if you could get this stuff, get suggestions into people's dreams, hey. Luckily,
now that's evil.
Yes, it is.
Soon we'll be incepting whole episodes of Where Did the Road Go?
You'll have you'll put it on. You'll be like in the same room with us, and there we are. But it's all a dream. You won't remember all of it when you wake up, if you wake up.
You just run into Joshua at an airport, and he touches your forehead.
Man. It's actually kind of frightening when you realize how much technology and stuff goes into this stuff, and a lot of it is sound based. And when you watch a good movie, sometimes they really know how to use certain tones and stuff. Of course, one of the common ones is someone gets hit in the head or something, and they put that slight high tone there, that ringing tone.
Yeah, I got so tired of how in movie trailers they started to use so much the Tibetan horn thing. Have you realized how this Tibetan trumpet?
Oh, yeah.
The Inception. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned that. Soraya. It's I remember going on a tour of Walt Disney World many years ago. I think they've actually stopped doing it's the tour where you got to like go underneath the Magic Kingdom, and see a lot of the backstage stuff. And it's interesting because I believe it's called The American Experience. It's an animatronic show about America, and at the time they said it was really interesting because a lot of foreign visitors would show up and say, like, I don't know why I had this really visceral reaction to this production because I'm not even from America, and the reason was because they claimed on the behind the scenes tour that the subwoofer and the frequency would actually vibrate your sternum and release endorphins through that action towards the end of the show. So yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely deliberate manipulation that happens a lot more than I think people realize.
Yeah, and if you don't actually hear it, it's the example I just gave with movies using that high pitched tone. You hear it, it's there, but there's subtle tones you can use that you don't know are there, and you don't know why you're having a particular effect from something like what you just described.
Right, exactly.
It's just like, ooh, I feel good, or I feel weird, or whatever. I'm scared.
Yeah.
And there are definitely low frequencies that cause fear.
Absolutely. I think it's part of the infrasound conversation.
Yeah.
I do think it does happen.
So what elements of the paranormal have we not discussed? Let's see. I mean, obviously the knocking and poltergeist accounts. We covered some of that. And why knocking? Why is knocking such a thing? You get it in poltergeist accounts, you get it in Bigfoot accounts. You have it in the after effects of UFOs.
I know one we haven't talked about.
What?
The crying child phenomena,
Oh, yeah, that's always a creepy
Oh, yeah.
one.
which I'm going to keep on talking about my book, and I'm going to give away the entire book before it even comes out. But it's interesting. You'll find this crying baby sound will appear, like Keel noted this. It appears in UFO landings. It appears in a lot of Bigfoot stuff.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but you'll also find it all the way back to some of this early 19th century collections of stories about fairies, where they hear the sound of a child crying in the wilderness, and attribute that to the fae folk as well. Now, what's interesting is that some research has come out that suggests that human beings are hardwired to react and investigate child crying. Like, you can't turn it off. Which I think is sort of an unsettling detail when viewed through, how often how often that appears in Fortiana.
And going hand in hand with that is the woman screaming.
Very true too. I actually heard something that I still to this day have not been able to reconcile exactly what it sounded like, because it sounded like somebody being straight up murdered. But I didn't have anything to go on besides this particular scream that I heard when I was just killing time in a car with a friend one night. But yeah, you find that a lot, and I think that sometimes, like, when people hear that, they might be hearing foxes, because foxes sound horrifying.
Yes, they do.
But yeah,
porcupines can sound crazy too. Like, porcupines can sound like really scary.
I didn't even know. I had no idea.
No, that one I didn't know either.
They can sound wicked.
And you figure, like, coyotes and stuff will make the sound of a hurt animal in order to lure people in, or to lure other animals in that they'll then pounce on.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. If I've said this before on Bigfoot shows, if they are some kind of creature that's trying to lure people out into the woods, which some suggest they are, crying babies and women in distress, a lot of people will have that immediate reaction to I got to go figure out what's going on there.
Yeah. And yeah, foxes. We actually have a couple of foxes living in the back shed, as I found out. There's a foxhole, and I saw a couple foxes run into the shed, and I was like, well, why did they run in there? It was just getting dusk, and I'm like, are there foxes living in the shed? I have a big pile of scrap metal I haven't gotten rid of on one side of the shed, and I'm like, where did they go? And then one of the foxes appeared on the far side of the shed and barked at me, and I went, he wants me to follow him. And so I kind of just followed just to see what he would do, and he ran down to the field, and he just kept screaming out in the field. And I'm like, you're trying to lure me away from where, probably the young ones are.
Oh, yeah.
And I was just like, that scream is creepy. It almost sounds like a woman screaming.
It does. I lived in a different town a while back, and I had a lady who lived across the street from me who, let's say she enjoyed her adult beverages. And every now and then in the summer, she'd come out and I'd hear her, like screaming and yelling. And I went out one night. I'm like, what's going on? Like, what's the matter? And she's like, there's a baby that's screaming back there in the woods. And I said, well, hold on a second, hold on. And this is night after night. She's going, and she's, yelling out like, what's the matter? How can I help you? And so finally I went out and I stood there with her. I said, that's a fox. And she's like, no, it's not. We need to call the police. I said, it's a fox. Trust me. I promise you, it's a fox. But yeah, they can sound horrifying.
I remember one of the only episodes I ever watched of the Paranormal State ghost hunting show. They ended up in some, like, ditch, and they're like, oh, this ditch is supposed to be haunted or whatever, and they start hearing these noises, and they start recording, and they're like, oh my God, listen to that. That's the creepiest thing I've ever heard. I've never heard anything like this. And they take it to an expert. The guy's like, yeah, it's a coyote. Those are coyotes.
That's great.
I mean, to their credit, they put it up there. They didn't, try to hide the fact that they didn't know what a coyote sounded like. But I mean, that's how creepy they sound. They don't sound like a dog. They make weird, bizarre little chirping noises and weird noises that do not sound. I mean, they sound like some kind of demonic creature, like a gaggle
True.
of weird voices. And if you've never heard them, you have no idea what you're hearing.
Yep.
I had a cat once who would, when she wanted attention, she'd almost sound like a baby crying.
That's creepy.
Yeah. And it was very loud. I had a friend over who was crashing on my couch, and all of a sudden that happened. From the hallway, you hear this what sounds like a baby cry, and he's like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "I'm not going to ruin this for him. I don't know. Why don't you go look?" And he's like, "I don't want to look. You don't have any babies in the house, do you?" And I'm like,
Priceless.
Finally, he opened the door and he's like, "It's your damn cat. What the hell?"
Priceless.
But, I mean, stuff like that happens. So, I mean, some of that stuff, when people hear weird stuff in the woods and stuff, it's animal, and they just have never heard anything quite like it, or it's an animal doing something really odd.
Or an animal, or animals can sound differently when they're dying. They can sound differently. I'm sure that there are examples where vocal cords or something aren't, give it a different, distinct sort of sound.
Sure. I forgot what I was going to say.
What is that, Joshua? Help me out. What is this characteristic that some singers have, this quality that they can actually project two different voices at the same time?
Yeah, like the Tuvan throat singing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Axl Rose, I think, is credited with having
Is
that.
he?
I think so.
I didn't know that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I can't remember her name.
I've been able to make it happen a couple of times. I think it's a second layer of vocal cords vibrating at the same time. I think, if memory serves.
Diamanda Galas is someone who does that.
The Tuvan singing is awesome. I mean, one of the most incredible concerts I ever saw was that Unhur band from Tuva. Absolutely fantastic. But it's not. I suppose, at least the way they do it, it's not supposed to be really great for your vocal cords if you want to continue singing not in that style.
Now, Tim, remind me: is it because of? Is it an overtone that's being hit, or is it actually?
It is. It's absolutely. The other name for it is overtone singing.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so it's not actually a separate vibration. It's as a result of being so in tune that it's actually generating an overtone.
I think so. Yeah, I love the sound of it. I've tried it, but I'm not. I can't get it. So I'll leave it to the Tuvans.
Yeah.
So it's again one of those things where you're generating two different tone or generating certain tones that make things sound like other things.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where if two musicians are playing something incredibly in tune, you can actually sort of generate a false overtone, and you'll actually hear three pitches even though there are only two, because your brain wants to fill in the triad.
Yeah, I mean, overtones are incredibly important. I describe I play primarily acoustic music, and I have millions of friends who are just like all these metal guys, and I explain to them the reason I like acoustic music is probably almost exactly why they like distorted guitars, because you're adding these layers of overtones. Acoustic music does it. It's just without the pedals. It's done in a more organic way, and a even more chaotic way. Though it doesn't, sonically appear that as much. You're always developing overtones. The way a string vibrates, it's you have these overtones and harmonics that are going on, and of course, as you're playing, they're constantly changing. But it's these layers of tones, and a distortion pedal with an electric guitar does the same thing. It's taking a very pure tone and then adding this chaos and these overtones to it. And it's very appealing to the ear. I think. I think in very similar ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So now, Joshua, you said you had tried the Bi-Aural type of stuff, and where did you find the Bi-Aural stuff to work with?
Oh, see, here's my confession: YouTube. So probably not the highest quality.
Yeah,
Psychic TV, a band called Psychic TV, recorded an entire album with binaurally. It's called Dreams Less Sweet, and if you listen to it on headphones, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
really.
Never mind the fact that the quality of like the actual. Never mind the fact that the actual stuff that's on YouTube is probably of dubious, efficacy. It also, I'm sure, that the compression rate would have an effect on that too. So,
if you listen to Dreams Less Sweet with earphones on, there's one song in particular. I think it's just like an interlude kind of thing where a woman's singing a cappella and she walked around the microphone. They had built a special set of microphones and some kind of head that was filled with liquid. I think some like a mannequin head to make it more like an actual human head than just the placement of these binaural mics. And if you listen with headphones, she walked around the mics, and you can you close your eyes, you can hear her walk around you while she's singing. It's pretty incredible.
Nice.
This was done way back in the 80s, early 80s. I think.
1983.
There you go.
Yeah.
I apparently own it and have never listened to it, so I'm going to have to remedy that.
There you go.
So, Dreams Less Sweet, 1983. For some reason, it's labeled as experimental.
Yeah, that would be adequate. Later on, they kind of did the whole acid house thing, and they went through sort of several phases, all of which I enjoy to various degrees. But at that point, yeah, I think experimental would be a good label for it.
Yeah. Well, they were kind of on the forefront of a lot of the industrial stuff too.
Yeah, it was original members of Throbbing Gristle, so they literally the band who coined the term.
And that stuff was always interesting because they would experiment with so many different layers of sound and how it affected you viscerally hearing it.
Yeah, complete naive musicians. They would just they were not schooled in any way. And they just went at it, which is very interesting.
And I think a friend of mine, I believe, if I remember right, was saying he had gone to see Einstürzende Neubauten, and they were playing on like steel plates or something, and they were inviting the whole audience to also, play on these steel plates. And he said the noise, the volume of this was just unreal in that room.
There was a band I saw in the 90s. They were called Crash Worship. And it was mostly rhythm. I mean, I think they would have like 20 people playing various drums and maybe someone on guitar and someone on bass. I forget. And they built every show like a ritual. And I saw them, it was the day after Halloween. Still the most intense show I've ever seen in my life. They were lighting fireworks off inside the like bottle rockets inside the arena. And the whole sort of ritual was developed to throw you off guard, and they were fantastic at it. They kept you completely on edge the entire time. It's incredible. Just an incredible show. They were masters at that. And I don't know how they ever got away with the things that they did.
Well, that is where, there's a point where music, what people take for granted as music, which is, the pop type stuff. I mean, there is plenty of stuff out there that's more ritualistic and that has more depth to it, I guess you can say. Bands like that are doing something a little bit different and tapping into that ritual aspect of music that ancient cultures used so much.
Oh yeah, you can find it. There's some really interesting stuff. Zero Comma is a band. Zero Comma, they used all human skulls and bones. Made a whole album of bone flutes and skull drums and stuff. But it was this whole ritual they did. They were very tied in with I think like a Crowley type of cult stuff.
When I went to see Morbid Angel, in between the bands playing, they were playing something like that. It might have been them, but someone said, this band is all like done on human bones, and it was all very ritualistic sounding.
Yeah.
So it may have been them. I just never knew what the band name was. I thought the idea was fairly interesting. And I think we just creeped out Joshua and Red Pill.
Nope, I'm just letting you guys go.
And probably half the audience who's going, what?
Yeah.
I was going to say something else. What was it? There was the one incident I had when we were talking about screaming, where we were sitting in the car and we heard a scream, like a guy yelling, and it was a very singular tone. It was like, we're sitting there and very quietly in the car, we hear like, and it just stops. And it went on for like probably 20 to 30 seconds before it stopped. And it was such a weird, distinct sound, because it sounded like, like it wasn't a loud sound that was coming into the car. The windows were shut. It was cooler out. It was a sound that sounded like it was right there in the car with us.
Huh.
And
that's a strange one.
Yeah. Oh, it's a very strange one. And we lost Red Pill. But huh?
It's a sad day.
I'm sure he'll be back in a moment.
There's another one with and this is it's very, very rarely reported, but it is reported where usually I'm not sure if it's just in association with Bigfoot reports, but because that's where I live, I see it a lot. And a lot of times, this is one of the things that'll get buried by as an inconvenient report, in the same way that the UFO reports and Bigfoot tend to get buried by some folks. But they'll report a singing like an angelic choir, and it's such an odd thing. They'll just say it's like this feminine sort of angelic voice that's sort of like singing almost. Some people report it as almost like an opera sound, and I don't know if that's whether they're not familiar with choral music, and they're just describing it as opera instead of choral music. But a lot of people report it as a sort of angelic kind of choral sound. Sometimes a single voice, and sometimes layered voices. But I mean, what an odd thing in combination with an ape in the woods.
Didn't Steve Stockton talk about some strange music in the woods? Does he? Did he?
I want to say yes, but I don't remember for sure. And we got Red Pill back.
Yep.
Yay.
When I had that experience, right afterwards, there were some weird lights on the ground too, which didn't seem to have any origin from above. Like I was walking under a tree and I got this like kaleidoscope of lights and primary colors on the ground in front of me, and that was the whole of the experience. And it severely freaked out the person I was with, who just didn't want any part of any of it. But like the sound, I mean, the lights were less weird than the sound, because the sound had such an odd quality to it being right there. There's a movie when we were talking about sound in the... Yes, Steve did have a story about sound of music in the woods, because we were talking, because I compared it to this movie, Yellow Brick Road, where these...
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, they really good movie, really creepy. The only thing is the ending is kind of so-so, because apparently they ran out of money. It was an independent film, and they didn't have enough money to do the ending they really wanted to do. So it didn't, like, the ending's okay. It's not, after the rest of the film, you're expecting something bigger for the end, and then the end hits and you go, that's it? Well, it was still a cool movie.
Nice. Yeah, I have heard of that, but I have not seen it. So
it's well
check
worth
it out.
checking. Yeah, it's worth checking out. It's a very strange movie, and of course, it's this music that they're following up this trail, and they keep hearing music, and then they realize they can't actually leave this trail. You're making scratching noises.
No, sorry.
It's just the supernatural.
So that's not Red Pill Junkie.
Oh, it was it was my supernatural beard.
Oh, well. And going back to like EVPs and stuff, we talked about possibly projecting it on there. It's also possible this stuff is recording from somewhere else, like if there are other dimensions, for instance, it could be picking that type of stuff up. I remember somebody saying that they had disconnected all of the audio stuff in the recorder they were using, and we're still picking up sounds on it. Like, so the recorder was not recording sounds that were happening at all, but yet this thing was still picking up EVPs.
There was again, to go back to Psychic TV, and I forget which album, but one of their albums they it was done on like a 48-track multi-track thing back when they were using tape, reel to reel, and they intentionally left one track open to have messages come through from wherever. I think it's when they recorded a tribute to Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones. I think it was for that, and they said they got this weird clicking sound where they had no mics or nothing hooked up to this track. They just left it completely open, and they got these weird sounds on that track, which I always thought was really neat.
Which album was that?
If it's the song to Brian Jones that I'm thinking of, I think it's Allegory and Self. I think it has Godstar on it. If that's the right song I'm remembering. Which is
have that.
It's a very pop song for them, but it's good.
Interesting. Okay, so are there any other aspects of sound we haven't touched upon?
Probably.
Yeah,
well, yeah, I'm sure there have, but anything you guys can think of right now?
My brain's pretty much racked.
All right. Other two of you?
Right now I'm, let's leave it open. Do another show.
Okay. All right. And maybe we'll change up. Like I said, I'm sure like Aaron and Mike might have some different views on some of this stuff. I'm sure Aaron will have something to say with some of the ritual aspects, as I'm sure he's delved into that as far as ritual and stuff and sound goes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I thank you guys. This has been an interesting and I hope productive conversation about this stuff.
An absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we discussed pretty interesting stuff.